Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Star Wars Loose Cannon. My name is Chris Higgins, and today I have some awesome guests with us, the Brothers Krynn. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves, and I can let everyone know kind of how I came upon your channel and your Substack.
Well, we started off on YouTube, but then we were directed to Substack by a friend, and he said, well, if you want to make it as writers, go to Substack. If not, you're not going to make it. And so we went there, and he said, try to aim for 200 subs after, just long term. And so we kind of did, and we've been very lucky because we managed to somehow trip and fall into way more than that.
750 subs late after that.
We've just been...
Yeah, a lot more than 200.
Just a bit.
About 987, I think. Blessed unharry our souls. And we, so we mostly, we're fantasy fiction writers, and we write about everything from Star Wars to Dragon Ball to Dracula to, I think, Mark Twain we're getting into. There's Conan the Barbarian, or I should say Hour of the Dragon. There's Lord of the Rings, there's Zelda, there's just about any and every topic that grabs our attention.
I think the one that was most surprising to me was Conan the Barbarian. I've been like I've just recently I finished the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time this year, and I like Zelda. I love Dragon Ball, and a couple other of those properties that you mentioned. But Conan the Barbarian was one that I was surprised by, and I do want, this was something that I maybe was thinking about asking later on, but just because I'm so curious, like, how did you get into that, and why do you like Conan the Barbarian?
We fell into it by accident, didn't we?
Yeah.
We were on YouTube, and someone said, why don't you do content, because we were doing a bunch of fantasy content, and someone said, why don't you do Conan too? We were like, yeah, but, why would we do that? So someone said, just read one of the Kull stories. Just read one of the Kull stories, and then read one of the Conan stories. Just read that. 2 stories. That's all we ask. So we said, well, okay, why not?
A couple of short stories. One.
And we read the Kull story. What we found was a story of haunting beauty and tragedy that nearly brought us to tears. And
I got frustrated because it's like, read the next Kull story, and here it is. It's like we start with this. Where's the next chapter? Where's the next chapter? It's like we finished it.
Yeah, and then we read Conan, Phoenix on the Sword. Our mediocre video got noticed by World of Conan, who really liked it, and then he wanted us to do a show with him a series of book clubs with him. So we did Hour of the Dragon. It has the same plot as Lord of the Rings. It's just with Conan. And we went into that just completely blind and were mesmerized. Because Conan is not like Arnie in the 1982 movie. That's a great movie. But the Hour of the Dragon is a very chivalric, very almost gentle story about love, really. And Conan is a much gentler character under Robert E. Howard's pen in Hour of the Dragon than what the public image is. He is harsher than the public image. He's a barbarian, after all. But he's also chivalric and gentle. He's a barbarian, not a savage, as he tends to claim. So we kind of tripped into it.
I found it surprising that Conan has a lot going on upstairs. He's very, very intelligent.
Yeah.
Despite the stereotype.
You say that because Queen of the Black Coast surprised you with a theological debate, and Conan just suddenly starts talking like a theologian about the nature of divinity, gods, demons, and whatnot on such a level that's like, oh God, we're reading a theological essay. And it is one. That's all Howard's writing in there, is at least for a chunk of the second chapter, is a theological essay. So we kind of tripped into it and found it smarter than what we thought it would be. And we've basically been just reading and rereading it like Conan stories ever since. We've not read every single one, but we've loved every single one we've read, except for the ones by some later writers, which are weird. A lot of them, like like the scantily clad chick and whatnot, that came after Howard. It's kind of like if people took up Lord of the Rings and then decided that Aragorn should have a different girlfriend in every story, and or Frodo should have a different girlfriend in every story, and she should be scantily clad every time. You'd be like, well, Lord of the Rings doesn't sound very good because it's just a bunch of near naked chicks and draped over some midget. But then you read the original stories and you go, wait, but it wasn't like that at all. And yeah, and so
What happened to you, Frodo? You used to go on adventures. Now you're just hanging out with this like hot chick all the time. Different one every year, it seems.
yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's concern.
Yeah.
Okay, so so it sounds like go into Conan Barbarian, but Howard is the author that you want to look for.
Yeah. Look for Hour of the Dragon.
Hour of the Dragon.
Yeah.
I also like the distinction you made between like barbarian and savage, where the barbarian is like kind of he's just uncivilized maybe.
Yeah.
And the savage is just like he's violent, he's chaotic, he's dangerous.
And evil.
And evil.
Howard makes the distinction. A barbarian is someone who is dangerous and untamed, but he's good.
Okay.
Like good is not safe under Howard's pen, like with Tolkien and Lewis. If you're good, you're not safe. But if you're savage, you're evil. So like it's. I've been thinking about doing an essay on the distinctions between good and evil as they perceived it, and how good at one time was considered very unstable in a way and not safe, while evil is considered safe. But the problem is with evil is that it is safe. That's the safe option you can do. It's harder to make the good choice. Conan is good, but he's not safe. But to use a distinction, let's say some of his rivals are savage but safe. I know that sounds weird.
To me, it sounds. I can see how this would fit within my head. So good can actually be very dangerous depending on. It can be dangerous because of meddling and things that people do that are with good intentions that actually are like really dangerous. Like an example is and you can tell me if I'm not on the right mark, but if you see someone, like if you saw a motorcycle accident and you saw someone lying on the ground, and maybe you would want to help, right? Because if you're a good person and you want to help someone that's in obvious pain, and so you go over and you lift the helmet off their head, and because maybe you're worried that they can't, that you want to see their condition, but actually what you might have done is just broken their neck.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Or and it's. So that's kind of what you say, like maybe good can be.
So yeah, but also, I think I remember hearing somewhere that the idea was also that in distinction, like when a woman chooses a man, let's say, if he's a good man, she's taking a risk on him, but if she's taking the bad guy, it's not as much of a risk. This is choosing instincts, a certain kind of instincts that are safe, and she knows. You know what I mean? The bad guy will often have more money than the nice guy. The nice guy has the potential to claim more because he's ambitious and he's good. So he could probably climb higher to an extent in society, especially in these old stories and whatnot, in the olden days. At least that's, I think, the distinction. So, like, for example, Tolkien was a nice guy. Edith took a risk by going for him because he had no money, he had nothing to his name, but by marrying him, she was taking a risk. She was risking it all on one throw of the dice. So, like, good is a throw of the dice. Like you pointed out, like, you might break their neck, or you might save their life. So,
or you might save their life. Yeah.
Yeah. Good might turn out to be, well, I would say Obi-Wan Kenobi is not safe, but he's certainly good.
Interesting. Why do you say that?
Well, people who love Obi-Wan tend to end up dead. But at the same time, Obi-Wan is someone who's very guarded. You look at any interaction with Celia that he has in some of the books, he has a bitter side. He can be hard on people. And you also look at his interactions with Anakin. He can be pretty, even Qui-Gon Jinn, he could be a bit snide. So, you know, like, he's got a sharp tongue on him. One similar to Raceland Magier. But on the other hand, Obi-Wan is good. He will fight. He will destroy everything in his path if he needs to. He will break what rules and laws he has to do the right thing, because it's the right thing to do. Obi-Wan may have a reputation for being a rule follower, but he's actually a bigger rule breaker than Qui-Gon Jinn and Anakin put together. It's just that he knows when to break them, when not to. But the thing is, make no mistake, he will break what rules and laws he has to do what he thinks is right. He follows his heart, but one's heart is a dangerous thing to follow, but he will follow it nonetheless. And that's the, whereas Qui-Gon will follow the rules and what Yoda has taught him to do, regardless if they are right or wrong, and oftentimes they're as wrong as they are right. So Qui-Gon will take the wrong path at times, then he'll flail about not knowing, how did this turn out so wrong? Well, it turned out wrong because you didn't do the right thing, Qui-Gon. You screwed up. And that's the thing. Like, the other thing is that Qui-Gon Jinn, at least in the Jedi Apprentice books, sometimes didn't always take responsibility like he should have for some mistakes. Obi-Wan took responsibility for Qui-Gon's mistakes. But in turn, Qui-Gon was a hard man to deal with. But Qui-Gon was a man who suffered a lot. But on the other hand, like I said, Obi-Wan is a better person, so he's less safe because everybody tends to turn up dead around him because he's always doing the right thing, and that puts people's lives at risk, like you said, with the helmet.
Another
Yeah, it's. Go ahead.
another character that is a good person in Star Wars would be Mace Windu. Would you say he's safe to be around?
Like, if you cross him, what'll happen?
I mean, you'll end up dead.
Yeah. But
If you cross Mace, right?
yeah, Mace is a badass, though. He's awesome.
Yeah. Now, I've seen this new canon has been portraying Mace as somewhat of a rule follower. Somewhat of like an institutionalist, like I'm for whatever the I'm kind of like group consensus guy. Like I want to do what the order is doing. Now, does that check with your guys?
No.
Does that seem like a departure from the original Legends or like EU stuff, or how do you see that?
I see it as running actually in complete contravention to Episode 3. Because the thing is, Mace in the EU, and also...
And I could be misinterpreting this.
No, it's okay. It could be.
Yeah.
But Mace in the EU and in Episode 3, especially the Episode 3 novel, what a lot of people forget is the novels often came out before the movies. Now, in some cases, the movie was kind of inadvertently delayed or something. But with Mace, at every point, and there's multiple novels to each movie, weirdly enough, but in each novel, Mace is portrayed as someone who's pushing Yoda and the Council and saying, we have got to take Palpatine down. He is dangerous. Yes. He is against the order. We cannot abide this. To do nothing, to passively wait for him to make the first move, is a stupid mistake. I am warning you, this will not end up well. This will blow up in our face. This will blow up in our face. And he keeps wanting to make a move or politically retaliate, like gather a political alliance around the Jedi in the Senate to counter Palpatine. And he does it in a few books. But every time Yoda basically neuters it and says, no, we're Palpatine's lapdogs. We don't fight back. We just take it. Yoda,
no, we sit around and we talk, guys. That's what we do.
Yeah, whereas Mace is a man of action. He's looking at this and going,
yes.
Like, oh, Palpatine's going to threaten the order. Then he punches us, we kick him in the nads. Then we punch him. Whereas Yoda sees it as, but that would be wrong. Turn the other cheek. But Mace doesn't see it that way. He sees it as, we can't just turn the other cheek because there are trillions of lives counting on us to do the right thing. And the right thing is not to wait passively. So Mace takes the attitude that the order should be a proactive force in the universe. So he's running counter to Yoda because he wants to arrest Palpatine. And it's clear in episode 3, he is the driving force in the Jedi Order, alongside Ki-Adi-Mundi and Obi-Wan, against Palpatine. He is not for Palpatine, whereas in turn, Yoda is much... I would argue Yoda should have probably been kicked out of his position like 200-300 years before, because he's just too tired and old, and he was better at school teaching. He just wants to be a school teacher. Let him go be a school teacher. Let him retire. He's too old. He doesn't know what the problems are. He doesn't understand the galaxy. Like, Kreia made a great point in KOTOR 2. How can you possibly understand the galaxy if you never go out there and interact with the average people? Mace does. Obi-Wan does. Even Qui-Gon Jinn does. Even Dooku did. Even Palpatine did, to an extent. But Yoda keeps waiting for the problems to come to his doorstep. And the problem is, by then, they mushroom far out of anyone's control. Even Palpatine, though he's a manipulator, some of these problems are beyond the Sith's ability to manipulate, in my opinion. So they mushroomed out of even the Sith. Let's say Palpatine said, I want to put the genie back in the bottle. He couldn't. It's beyond all control. So this completely mushroomed out, and Yoda just wants to passively wait till the problem comes home. But by then, you can't do anything. So Mace is someone who he wants to take action. And you can tell in episode 3, there's a lot of tension between him and Yoda. Yoda wants to just wait for the problem to come to him. Mace wants to go confront it and deal with it. But the problem is, they waited too long. I have the opinion, the problem with Mace is, it was Yoda who was his Jedi Master, and he has no desire to go against his daddy. He's a filially pious.
Okay.
He's filially pious. Like he's, like Luke is towards Anakin. It's like, I can't kill my dad. So Mace is like, I can't usurp my dad. That would be wrong. I have to be a good son. Like I know my dad's an idiot, but I don't want to go against him. Well, not that Yoda's an idiot, but he's making a big mistake. He's ruining the Order. Well, I can't go against him. That would be wrong. I mean, he's ruled for, 900 years? I need to just, I want to do this. I want to go out and do the right thing, but I'm restrained. Now, this is where I'm actually going to say, this is why Luke is the chosen one in a way. Where Mace says, I will wait until Yoda comes around. Yoda will come around. I'll convince him. I'm going to take action, but I must convince Yoda. I must convince the council. I can't just do whatever I want. So a lot of people perceive him as just bending to the Order. Yes and no. He does, but if he were to go alone, his situation is such, if he were to go alone without any Jedi support, Yoda would probably throw him out of the Order and say, this son of a gun killed the Chancellor. How dare he? And Mace doesn't want to be that. He fears Yoda's disapproval. But in turn, this is where Luke is stronger, in a way. Luke would say, yeah, okay, kick me out, throw me out, frame me for the murder of Palpatine. Whatever, I'll go do it anyways. I'm going to go do the right thing because I'm a Jedi. Of course, Luke would say, I'm just going to go and do it. By the time Luke would say, I'm just going to go and do it, Kyle Katarn's already raced on ahead to go and do it. And has already done it. No, I'm joking. No, I'm joking.
Kyle has returned with Palpatine's head.
Yeah.
What are we talking about now?
Yeah, that's Kyle. It's like, wait, what? Sorry.
You guys meeting, bro. I've already solved the problem.
Yeah. But what's interesting is the dynamic, between Luke and Kyle is very similar to Yoda and Mace, but the difference is it's much more cooperative and relaxed and loving almost, and honest and open. So, Kyle and Luke are the best team ever in Jedi Academy and Jedi Outcast.
Another detail about Mace is that he's also a historian. So he sees the patterns that happened centuries and millennia before. Yeah.
Now, he is looking at things from a historian's perspective, from the perspective of someone who's nervous about also the legal precedent. You go around killing the Chancellor. Well, I don't think it's ever
happened. Not a good look.
Yeah. I don't think it's ever happened. And that's the thing. But any other questions?
No, that's the thing is what criticism of Yoda is that in that point is that the enemy kept getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
It's not as if they could just, let's just wait. He kept making himself a stronger opponent. Palpatine did, because he kept gathering more power around himself politically until he got to be the Chancellor.
Yeah. Like,
And so it's like, what are you waiting for exactly? Like, you're already behind the ball.
yeah, that's, I think, the thing that Mace feared. And he was like, are you looking at this? But the difference is, weirdly, I think Yoda had a lot more in common with Anakin than Mace did. Because, like, Yoda and Anakin are looking at the CIS as the enemy. They're not looking internally.
Yeah.
They're not paying attention to the politics. They're like, oh, good, the Chancellor has more power. That means less deliberation. And they're not cluing into the fact, well, yeah, but so, yeah, like, but that on the other hand, weirdly, I do sympathize with Anakin during Episode 3. I really do. Like, the dude really, really was served a raw deal. And on top of that, Anakin himself admits in the novel he's not much of a political thinker. He's like, I'll leave that to Obi-Wan. Like, that's the thing. In the EU, he's like, yeah, I'll leave it to Obi. He'll do the thinking for me. Well, the trouble is, Obi-Wan is... There's a reason Palpatine manipulates things so that Obi-Wan will be sent. And...
Right.
Yeah, so he needed to separate Anakin from Daddy. Because Anakin tends to follow Obi-Wan. Well, it's his daddy. It's like, I'll follow him, and he'll tell me what to think and do, because I just need Dad to help make the decision for me. Well, Dad's not home anymore. You need to make the choices yourself. And that's the problem. Like, not that Anakin's irresponsible. He would have been a pretty good dad, but the trouble is he's not equipped to handle the situation he's faced with. And the thing is, if Obi-Wan had been around, he would have been able to handle it. But Obi-Wan was not around. And Anakin is very much... I know a lot of people tend to think of him as a mama's boy because, his close bond with Shmi, and I will somewhat agree. But I also think that on some level, given how often he repeats, he's like a father to me. He's like a father to me in Episode 2. I think over the years he became more of a daddy's boy. And the thing is, Obi-Wan wasn't an easy father for a long time. In Episode 2, he's pretty verbally abusive throughout the movie. And then in Episode 3, he's lost that because he's made peace with Anakin. But the thing is, Anakin is a daddy's boy. He craves his father's attention and approval. In a lot of ways, I think this was purposely done by Lucas, because he's juxtaposing Anakin with Luke. Luke wants to redeem his father. Anakin wants the approval of his father. They both kind of want their dad's approval. It's just to go about it in different ways, and the trouble is that one of them had Palpatine corrupting him, the other didn't. But arguably, Luke had stronger set of morals to an extent, and Luke had a better head on his shoulders for a lot of problems. So Luke was able to perceive when he was being manipulated and when someone was trying to corrupt him. And I would argue Ben Kenobi was a corruptive influence and was as wicked as Palpatine in his own way, because he was advocating for parricide. And the thing is, if Luke had killed Vader, Luke would have turned to the dark side, or would have become a broken man. And I think that the weird thing is, Ben didn't care. Luke was a tool, a weapon. But on the other hand, Obi-Wan Kenobi would care and would be horrified. So by trying to redeem Anakin from Vader, Luke was also trying to redeem Obi-Wan from Ben. It was a double redemption. He was trying to save his father and his grandfather in a weird way. And I think that's the real beauty of Episode 6. He succeeds in saving both father and grandfather and reconciling Anakin and Obi-Wan. So, yeah.
That's amazing, and I don't know if everyone really looks at it like that all the time, so I think that's really beautifully said. How it was like, how both of these characters are dealing with seeking out the love of their father or approval, and saving them. I also want let's just take a step back for a second. I just was curious, like, how did you guys get into writing, and how have you, like, I know you talked a little bit about how you got onto Substack, but how did you start out as writers and fantasy in particular?
You want to start, or should I, Dan?
I know that when I started writing, it was, yeah, initially it was fan fiction, but I was reading out of frustration with superheroes after the spider octopus thing. I decided, you know what, I'm going to rewrite things the way I would have liked it.
Yeah.
And then
I like it.
things would move on. And as we were analyzing fantasy, I guess
You caught the bug.
I caught the bug. It's like,
As for me, well, I think this is the part where I should jump in. Um, I, well, our oldest brother would do this thing since I was about 3. He was often babysitting us because our parents were separated eventually, and he would play Zelda in front of us. My first memories are of watching him play Zelda, and also watching Lion King in theaters. But Zelda was the first real game I saw. Then it was Sweet Conan to an extent. And the thing is, he would have me, and even Dan sometimes, invent backstories and scenarios for the characters. So he would have us tell oral stories about each character, then tell us the actual backstory of the character. And he did this
awesome.
for it was awesome. He did this for a number of stories. Little did we know he was kind of honing our brains and honing our craft when we were young. Um, but at 11, I tried writing my first story. It was terrible. It was terrible. Um, but then at 14, I started reading more and more mythology. We had always watched Hercules' Legendary Journeys. We had always liked and read stories of the myths, like the Greek myths, the Norse myths. But I started reading them almost religiously, and they mesmerized me. But from there, I started making my own world. At 17, I started trying to write it into an actual story. It was terrible. And then over the years, I started writing other stuff and experimented here and there. The story I wrote when I was about 17 to 19 was rewritten into the Olympnomachi, which you can find on my Substack. I rewrote that after I read the Silmarillion, and that I read a few years ago for the first time, and I loved it. It's my favorite book ever since. But I revamped my first story from when I was an older teen into that, and then I started writing other stuff, and really uh, the journey towards writing much more seriously in both English and French has been motivated kind of by the idea, with regards to fantasy, that France doesn't really have a mythology like Lord of the Rings does and whatnot. England and Texas have mythologies. France and Scotland, where our ancestors come from, don't. So the idea was maybe to create something for them, like a Lord of the Rings for Scotland and France, and give to our people, our Celtic people, something they could say, this is mine. And then as I was writing for Substack, and writing from, these other stories, I eventually, Dan and I started working on Baron Cub because he wrote a few other little short stories here and there, and then I realized, okay, I want to write a pulpy, Mark Twain, Robert E. Howard styled story of like a wolf and cub, except with Anglo-Saxon conquest of England, except in a fantasy mythology Earth. And I'm like, okay, how do I do that? Dan has a skill for darker writing. I am still trying to figure my head around that. I'm writing from a Tolkienian angle. So we kind of sat down and started kind of working together. So after that, while some projects are just mine, some of them we've been kind of working on it together. So that's when I basically took Dan away from a lot of the fan fiction and superheroes and said, I need your help with fantasy. And he started helping me with fantasy. And then it was, all right, well, we're going to work on more extensive projects together as writers. And it kind of accidentally happened. I needed help. He helped. And then he fell in love, I think, with Baron Cub, and we started working on more and more projects. Now we are working separately on some projects, but we're also working together on a few.
Mm-hmm. And one thing Joe mentioned that sometimes our brother would pause things, and that's an exercise we still use today to help create backstories and to practice our creativity.
Yeah, he kind of trained us. I was trained since I was about 3 for that sort of thing. So,
Wow.
yeah, he was our oldest brother. He's a really interesting guy. But he kind of saw this as he would pause the game or pause the movie and do this to us. More because, I don't know, I think he just he wanted to see how well we can entertain him. And he wanted to include us in the game because he played only one-player games. But he was highly conscious of our needs as well, almost like a third parent to an extent. So, yeah, he was really, really good in that regard. I hope to someday maybe do the same for my kids.
That's really touching, actually. And it sounds like you guys have like some really brotherly love. That's great. And I have my own version of this story with Zelda. My older brother used to play Zelda, and obviously there's only one N64 in the house, so I would just have to watch. And my job was to really mostly be quiet because we didn't like each other. There was an age of we didn't like each other yet. And so whenever he would struggle with a puzzle, I would say, well, why don't you try this? And then he would begrudgingly try it. And so that was kind of my job.
Well, we went through a phase like that with our oldest brother, but it was very, very brief. Typically, he would pause it and say, all right, what's the lizard guy with the sword's backstory, Joe? And it'd be like, well, I don't know. Now, you have 5 seconds, Joe. Do it. Okay, well, his backstory is this. He comes from this tribe, and he does this, and there's this. Okay, what is the tragedy? What's tragic about him, and why did he pick up the sword? And why does he kill? Okay, well, I come up with those details, and then it's, all right, I'll give it a C minus. Or, okay, really good. I'll give you an A on that one. And then he'd start it up again. Then, next foe or next ally in Suikoden, he'd have me do that. And then he'd tell me what the actual character backstory was, if the character had one. It was pretty cool.
That is cool. And I like that being, utilizing that kind of imagination with a video game, as a kid. It sounds fun.
Yeah, it was.
Even, actually, it sounds fun as an adult.
Yeah, there's a reason why whenever I play stuff like MMOs with avatar creation and whatnot, it always takes me far longer because I try to figure out a story for this character.
And hey, oftentimes I'd end up sitting down right next to you and it's like, oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Joe, I'm trying to work here. Yep, but what about this? And Dan does it together and puts it in. It's like, oh, and then Dan will go, I told you to shut up. Oh, wait, how about this, Joe? Oh, that's a great idea. How about this? Oh, no, that doesn't work. Oh, yeah, you're right. And we just go back and forth like that. And yeah, it's actually, when it comes to those character creation things, Dan's always better at the costumes.
Yeah.
And the costume design stuff. I'm terrible at it. A few times, didn't I? We worked together on the backstory, then you designed the costume a few times, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was years ago, though.
Yeah, my friends and I, we got together some friends to play Baldur's Gate, which I think is a really fun thing if you have a group that can get together and do it, because it's 4-player co-op.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, online, and it's got an immersive story and everything, and I can't imagine the amount of dialogue that has been recorded and all that stuff, but we just come up with our own meta story as we're going along, just because my friend Rich, basically if any character is mean to him in the game, he's just look, that guy's a jerk, I'm gonna kill him. I'm like, all right, that's your character you're role playing as. My character is role playing as a simp for this other NPC character that will never like me, and just the stories can just organically develop like that. So I imagine that it is a fun time getting together with friends and just using your imagination.
Sounds like a regular session of D&D.
Yeah, it is basically that. It's basically what it is.
Yeah.
So transitioning a little bit, I, listen to some of the other podcasts that you guys were on, or at least Joe, you were on. Dan, I don't know if this will be the same for you, but Joe, I remember hearing you say that you actually, you're. I assume both of you are big Lord of the Rings fans.
Yeah. Well, Dan's reading Lord of the Rings for the first time.
Oh, cool.
We're at chapter 11 or 12 now with our podcast with Matt from Dork Lords, which I have to upload some episodes onto Substack soon. I've been reading Lord of the Rings since I was 26. And, well, basically reading and rereading Lord of the Rings,
Right.
the Silmarillion and its expanded epics, and Hobbit every year, almost. And it's been about 6-7 years. And Dan is reading through Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings for the first time. I think overall you've been enjoying it.
Yeah, it's like, and yeah, I really enjoyed The Hobbit.
Who doesn't?
Everyone likes The Hobbit. Yeah, but so, okay, so now I was just gonna say, I remember you saying that you actually didn't like Lord of the Rings, like when you first encountered it,
When I was a kid,
and that when you were a kid.
and it. Well, the trouble was I was French, and English was a second language, and I could not understand the English in Tolkien.
Okay.
So, I was reading Lord of the Rings, and I could not understand the descriptive paragraphs, so I was frustrated and flustered, and I felt humiliated
Okay.
because I couldn't understand the English. And at that time, I thought my English was at a really good level, but the thing is, I really couldn't understand it, so I came to hate it and what it represented for me. But then, when I was about 25 or 26, I was depressed because I came home from Japan. I got homesick, but then when I arrived home, I got homesick for Japan. And I was very, very depressed and feeling very lonely. And so I started reading a bit of Children of Hurin, and a friend called Paul, who became, I think, our best friend at that time, recommended Lord of the Rings. And so I read it, and within a few chapters I was going, why did I ever hate this as a kid? And because he said, you're not a true fantasy fan if you have not read Lord of the Rings. That was his throwing the gauntlet down, and as a true Frenchman, I, of course, immediately picked it up and said, okay, fine, I'll prove it's bad. But then, within 3 chapters I'm in love, and I'm going, why did I hate this as a kid? Oh, right, I didn't understand it. Holy mac, this is one of the greatest things ever. And when he next saw me, he was snickering and smirking at me because he noticed. Well, I was on the bus and I was reading and I wouldn't take my eyes off it, and he came on, noticed how engrossed I was, and he then said, "So, is it any good? Or is it crap?"
Told you so.
Yeah, and yes, it's good. Damn it! And you have him. Yeah, I told you so.
That's funny. Yep. So I guess my question is then, did you like Star Wars at first, and when did you first get into Star Wars? Did it hit you right away, or did it take a slow burn?
Well, I actually saw episode 4. I thought, weirdly, I had a weird thought when I was about 4 or 5 when I first saw it.
Okay.
What's the point? And I just ended up thinking, what's the point? And then, weirdly, I saw episode 5 and 6, and I immediately despised them. And I thought, and I simply had the thought, do I not understand this? Because, bear in mind, it was shown to me in English, and I could follow it visually, but I didn't know English until I was 6. So, or at least started to understand in English until I was about 6 years old. So, I'm looking at the screen, people are speaking in English, I'm not understanding a word, and I'm like, what's the point? And it's not until a few years after I rewatched them, and I went, oh, now I understand. What is the point? And I thought, I don't like this.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was a kid, and I was like, I don't like this. What is the point? And then, weirdly, I saw episode 1, and I had this weird reaction. I was like, they're talking politics. I don't understand what they're saying. No, but I thought this is really intelligent. Like I realized this is really smart stuff. I don't understand it. I was about 8 years old or so, and I was like, Dad, what is this? They're talking about stuff I don't understand. And you had our dad, who said, "Well, you don't understand it, Joe, because well, you're going to need to be a bit more grown up before you understand it." And you had me, oh, cool. And then you have the sword fight and whatnot, and the music. So, ironically, for me, episode one was the most explosive, amazing thing ever. And it was my first encounter with a political thriller of sorts, and so I was like, "Oh, this is advanced stuff." But when it came to the everything else, other part of the plot, I was like, "This is an amazing movie." So overall, it was episode one. Then I went back and rewatched episode 4, 5, and 6, and I actually enjoyed them because episode one
Okay.
got me to actually think about it and went, "Oh, if this is all part of the same series or like the same movie." Oh, I thought episode 4, 5, and 6 were dumb. Oh, that no, they're not dumb. Okay, whoops. So that was me as a kid. I know people are going to be like, "You're an idiot," maybe, but I just, as a kid, I just thought they were dumb, and it was just, what's the point? But then as I got older, I realized what the point was, and I went, "Oh, yeah, okay,
For
Point
me,
the starship go vroom.
yeah,
for,
that was it."
for me, I first watched Star Wars Episode 4 at about 8 years old when I was being babysat by one of our mother's friends. Here it is. She popped in Episode 4. I enjoyed it and asked, what about the next one? This friend, funny enough, said, no, go play. It's fine, you've had enough TV.
Oh, that's a team.
And then the next time, it's like I remember snippets of Muppet Yoda, which was good. And then there's Star Wars Episode 1, which our dad dragged us to go see.
Oh, he was excited. He was like a boy at Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
But like I said, after the theater, remember I was asking him, I don't understand. What were they talking about in the movie? You'll understand when you're older, Joe. It's like,
And I know that after that, the two of us, our older brother and our dad, we were all buzzing on the way back home.
yeah.
And,
That was a good memory.
yeah. And I know I really enjoyed Episode 1.
And after episode one, he then said, "Oh, you know what you kids would love? Indiana Jones." And our oldest brother then went, "Yes!" And then the next time we saw him, he showed us the Indiana Jones trilogy in almost one full sitting, in over the course of one or 2 days, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome.
After he bought a lot of sweets,
Oh yeah,
sweets and chips, because he knew this was going to be.
our dad was like the greatest movie buff ever. Like he knew westerns, he knew history dramas, he knew political thrillers, he knew noir from the 30s, he knew horror, he knew like he was a movie buff in French and English, and the depth and breadth of his knowledge of
Wow.
film surpasses ours. We're kind of dunces compared to him, I think.
He knew what he was doing to get you hooked into the movie world.
Mm.
Yeah, no, it's like when I heard that you like didn't like these movies. It's that's very like in your first go around, like that is one of the more unique like Star Wars introductions that I've heard. Like when I was a kid, I got brought to Lord of the Rings by my dad, who loved Tolkien, to the theater, and like didn't know anything about it. Just went to the theater, and I just thought it was awesome. I didn't know what was going on. Star Wars, I just had a friend who had a bigger TV than we did, and they had a copy of Star Wars. And every time I went over to his house, I asked if I could watch it, and he'd be like, "Every time you come over, you seem to just want to watch Star Wars." And I was like, "No, no, no, no. I like hanging out with you. We can go play." But really, I did want to watch Star Wars.
You made the right call.
Yeah, he wasn't that cool. His TV though, it was nice back then.
Oh,
So I had a few more questions for you guys. Like, as writers, like, I mean, do you feel like are there any like of these newer movies? Do you feel like they're what kind of I'm guess curious from a writing perspective how you viewing the sequel trilogy.
oh, total trash. I'll just be blunt.
Getting right to it. Yep.
Yep. But we've not seen them because it might sound weird, but well, one professor who really normally people hate me and like Dan, but this one professor absolutely hated Daniel and liked me to a limited extent until she didn't. Loved Star Wars, but she had terrible taste. So she ended up going, well, this Star Wars is the greatest one ever. And I went, okay, so Force Awakens, don't watch it. Remember? All right, got it. And then I looked up the plot, and Dan also found a great video by Andariel, or Emperor Caligula, where he ended up just tearing at a new one. And we went in because he saw it, and we went, okay, we'll watch his review, and we'll get a feel. And we walked out of that review going, wow, that sounds terrible. We're not watching it. And but a lot of people were disillusioned by the time of, I think, Last Jedi, I think it is. But
Yeah.
we were disillusioned by Force Awakens, but we also didn't really like the Clone Wars cartoon from 2008. We also didn't like Force Unleashed. So we were kind of already out of the Star Wars scene by then. We were kind of detaching, and for us it was like, well, okay. But when people would rant for or against it, we were kind of like, I think, just, okay, that's fine. Why are you freaking out? Well, what's the big deal? Like, we could, you could freak out about this, or you could just go back and watch the original 6. And,
Yeah.
Or you could just go back and play Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy, or Jedi Outcast, and just enjoy Kyle. Like, what's the... Or play KOTOR 2. I don't understand. What's the problem here? Who cares? Oh, Disney says this is their canon. Well, that's nice, but I don't care. That's their canon. I don't need to abide by it. I don't... But on the other hand, like, okay, like, if you like what they do, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. I don't know. Like, I guess we were just, like, completely detached, and we were just like, whatever.
That's the right approach.
Yeah, because for me, had the story been about Finn, who, with him learning courage, if it was him that became the new Jedi to rise up, that would have been a story worth writing. But since they decided to go with
Rey,
it's like,
no.
yeah, no thanks.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were onto something with Finn. Like I felt like they built up the piece, or they established a base for which these 3 young characters could grow, and then the Last Jedi, they kind of completely went off the rails with the character growth, I feel. And like Finn could have had a really great arc, because he was, at the beginning, he was like really focused on Rey and thought she was amazing and kind of, I think, wanted to impress her. Maybe he was romantically interested. And then he could have gone off and realized like his own path. But then really they just settled on with the fact that like your character arc is that you are Rey's best friend. That's it.
I think
You're just a
I think what I was
cheerleader.
also annoyed. Yeah, I think what I was also annoyed about was that when I first heard about the movie, I was a little interested, but hearing they killed Han Solo kind of killed my interest, because for me it was like, no, you kill Chewbacca, you don't kill Han. And the other thing was, I was like, oh, they're making what I heard was they're making about a young kid who teams up with Han, and I went, oh, Anakin Solo, great! I can't wait to see him on the screen. I hope he gets a better rap than the stupid idea of killing him like they did in the book that ruined the sequel here. No, they're not doing that. Then what are they doing? It's about a chick. Jaina? No. Who? Oh, is it Kyle's daughter? No, Kyle doesn't exist. You lost me. And that was the conversation. I'm like, you lost me.
Okay.
Just because they don't have Kyle. Yes. Why? Kyle's more important than Luke. That was my rebuttal. Like, I like Kyle more. I like Luke, but I like Kyle. You must have me. You must give me both. And it's like, but just because they don't have Kyle Katarn, you're not going to join in? No, I will not watch anything if they do not acknowledge Kyle Katarn and Luke Skywalker. And that's why, I know I'm pretty entrenched in my opinion. It's just Kyle and Luke left a strong impression on me growing up.
I wish I had more Kyle Katarn knowledge or like have read him. What books like do I need to read to get into Kyle Katarn?
He has, I think, the Jedi Knight series comics and books, I think.
Okay.
He's also in the Dark Forces 2 video game where, because Kyle was the one who stole the Death Star plans. And he did it because his dad was killed. And his dad, Morgan Katarn, led a rebellion on a planet against the Empire. He was killed brutally, and his head was chopped off and stuck on a pike by a Sith Lord called Jarek. And Jarek was really like the third Sith Lord to Vader and Palpatine. But the difference is where Palpatine was growing old and weak here, that because he was getting too old, and Vader was just sinking into a midlife crisis. Jarek never gave in. He never gave up. He was still pretty relentless and powerful, and he still believed fully in the dark side. Kyle, though, by Dark Forces 2, is an angry young man who, though he stole the Death Star plans, still hungers for vengeance for his father's death. But Kyle also is tainted by the memory that the last time he spoke to his dad, he wouldn't look him in the eye, and his dad said, "I want you to know, even though I don't agree with you going to the Imperial Academy, you're still my son. I love you. I'm proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud of you going out there." And Kyle would not answer him. But Kyle felt ashamed of this. So this was his chance to make what he thought he did wrong right. But as he goes on the journey in Dark Forces 2, he starts to realize his anger, like, it's eating him up inside. It's destroying him. And he ends up discovering he's Force sensitive. But he's not just Force sensitive. He's stronger than Luke. But the problem with Kyle is because he's more powerful in raw power, his angry actions have more consequences. And so he learns from mistakes, and now he does in the end seek revenge against Jarek, and he does get it. But then he's kind of tainted by this knowledge that he may have done something wrong. Now, he gave Jarek a fighting chance to get out if Jarek wanted to, but Jarek didn't take it. But Kyle starts to succumb to the dark side, and then he gets scared, and at the beginning of Jedi Outcast, he cast away the Force. He cut himself off, walked away, despite Luke trying to plead with him. Luke was maybe not his Jedi Master, but was certainly his guide in a way. And Luke was always the mentor on an emotional and spiritual level, and is like his confessor. And Luke just tells him, "You got more power than I have. Kyle, you can do so much good. Come on. You gotta do the right thing. You can't just turn away from the Force." So you nearly turned. Listen, okay, you had a near brush incident. That doesn't mean you just throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can learn from this. You can grow from this. Kyle doesn't see it that way. But then when Jan, his girlfriend, ends up seemingly killed, but really she's captured, Kyle goes back to the Force and wants his lightsaber back, but he wants for revenge again. But then as he's going on this quest, he scares himself of his own anger again. But instead of turning away from Luke, this time he turns towards him. And Luke guides him back to the light. But in turn, Luke's first Padawan, Dasan, is the villain. And Dasan ends up slain by Kyle, who has to defeat him to save the Jedi Order and the Republic. And at the end, Kyle becomes kind of like a Mace Windu, a master of ceremonies to Luke. And Luke proves himself the greatest Jedi in the galaxy because he ended up redeeming Kyle and reaching him at his lowest points, when he was depressed or when he was angry. And Luke managed to, like, the way those games build up Luke, he is the greatest Jedi. He might not be he might not be a warrior at his core. He doesn't like fighting.
Mm-hmm.
But Luke is the greatest because he is the wisest, and he is the smartest Jedi in the galaxy. He's also able to save Sith Lords and save Jedi who are falling. He's able to pull them out from the darkness and bring them back to the light. He can do what no one else can. So in Jedi Academy, he makes Kyle a teacher, and Kyle becomes the teacher to Jaden Korr and Rosh Pennon. Jaden nearly falls because he has rage problems. Like, Kyle had some problems about revenge, but he was never a rageaholic. Jaden is a rageaholic. So you see a rageaholic who has like an Irish temper, who he has blackout rages, it seems,
Ooh.
in the story. But Jaden, as the story progresses, realizes, I'm having problems here. And right as he's about to seek revenge for a betrayal by his former best friend, Rosh, he realizes how far he's going and turns off his lightsaber, only to then end up saving Rosh's life right after. So this is the story of Kyle Katarn, summarized. It's a really
That's really cool. I'm really interested. Yeah, and I think what you said, it's giving more insight into why so many people hold Luke in very high regard.
He's the greatest.
And Kyle Katarn, right? But if you didn't look at some of those materials, some of those books, you might not come to that conclusion, I think.
Yeah. And the thing is, everybody wants Luke to be the strongest, but Leia is stronger than Luke in the Force.
Right.
And so is Kyle. They're both stronger than him, but are they greater than him? The thing we have to remember is Yoda says, a Jedi does not measure things in terms of power. And even Mace doesn't believe in measuring things in terms of power. Power is meaningless to the Jedi. What matters is doing the right thing and helping others and, protecting the innocent. It's basically being a knight in shining armor. And ultimately, like, I'm going to pull it back to King Arthur because I love King Arthur. But sure, Arthur is the greatest knight and the greatest warrior and the greatest everything in the Arthurian myths. But the greatest knight at his court is Sir Gawain. While Lancelot is preening about being trying to prove he's the strongest, Gawain is the greatest knight because he's actually going out and protecting orphans and young women and proving and claiming the title of the Maiden's Knight. He's going out doing the right thing and just saving people. Lancelot's the strongest, supposedly. Really, Gawain is, but Gawain's the one who goes out and does all the right things. So, like, do we measure it in terms of strength, like with Lancelot? Or do we measure it in terms of goodness, of heart, and doing the right thing? I think that's what we should measure Luke. That's why he is the greatest. And
that makes him different than the Sith as well, who would probably just measure in terms of power.
Yeah, by their measurements, Kyle's the greatest. But the thing is, by the measurement of the Jedi, Luke's the greatest. But the other thing that the Sith never counted on is, for example, there's no way Anakin should have lost that fight to Obi-Wan. Yet Obi-Wan completely trounced him. Even though Obi-Wan is not
because
as powerful.
He's wiser? He's more measured? He was... Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Anakin was always always a great tactician, always a great strategist, always like I held him in extremely high regard in terms of martial ability. Like, if you think he's not smart, it's not true. If you think he's dumb, you just don't. He has gaps in his intelligence, but that's not in terms of fighting and battles and go ahead.
I was going to say, everyone says Vader is super smart. Well, Vader is a dumbed down Anakin in a way. And the thing is, if you hold Vader up in high regard intellectually, well, bear in mind, Vader is just an older Anakin, except darker. Anakin is as smart as Vader. The IQ didn't change to a large extent. What changed? Well, the thing is, as a young Darth Vader, Vader charged in without thinking. Vader was more impulsive than Anakin. Anakin is impulsive, but he's not stupid. Like, you look at the end of episode 2, his reaction to Obi-Wan is captured. Okay, I screwed up with Shmi, Anakin is saying. How do I save Obi-Wan without rushing in and getting Obi-Wan killed? And, he's trying to become more measured. He's trying to emulate Obi-Wan's behavior. And the thing is, Anakin is very smart. He has abilities above most people. But the thing
Right.
is, he's got a hot-headed side. But on the other hand, he's trying to approach this very smartly, very intelligently. But he doesn't always succeed. But the thing is, he has martial abilities above the average, like you pointed out. As Vader, he's just had more time to educate himself because he's had 25 years to just sit down and study and try. And we also got to bear in mind, as Darth Vader in that suit, uh, he's basically trying to emulate Obi-Wan in a way, become a Sith version of Obi-Wan, because he knows Obi-Wan completely beat him and trounced him. So I would argue he's emulating Obi-Wan, but in a darker way, trying to fight like him, trying to think like him, trying to be as resourceful and clever and sneaky as Obi-Wan. That's what Vader's trying to do. But
This is a little obsessive because his failure is he roots his failure in Obi-Wan. He blames him for his current condition.
Yeah. And yet he still finds a way to basically fight. Like, he still ends up winning and losing some fights. Like, Ferris Olin fights him to a draw. And I think that humiliation also stings. But Ferris Olin is just a very resourceful character in the Last Jedi book series. But
Yeah, it's hard to believe like Anakin ever being bested. I mean, Obi-Wan did it, but it's like it's just at his peak, at his peak when we see him in episode 3. It's really tough to imagine him being beaten in a fight.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to think Vader is stronger than Anakin and better and is peak in a way. Because
I don't think so. I don't see it that way. Yeah,
I'm looking at the novels. I'm not looking at the movies. I know the choreography
Okay.
in the movies. But
He's extremely powerful no matter how you slice it.
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Like if you were to take Anakin from episode 3 versus, let's say, Vader from, let's say, 8 to 10, let's say 13 years after episode 3, I would put my money on Vader. But I think by episode 6, Vader's at his weakest. Because, as well, in some ways, because he's going through a midlife crisis. He's been fighting his entire life. Bear in mind, he's spent more of his life in that suit. And, at the beginning of episode 4, the Emperor has dissolved the Senate. And, the regional governors will have complete control over the running of everything. So, basically, we're going into a decentralized state where everybody's going to be in a feudal war. It's Sengoku Jidai. Everybody's fighting with each other. There's no federal government. That's all been dissolved. Palpatine basically declared it a feudal war, a feudal era. Well, Palpatine may not have... Well, I theorize Palpatine's been living like Robert Baratheon for 20 years, so he's kind of hopped up on some stuff and not thinking. But Vader is basically looking at this and going, I've been running the show for 20 years. You just dissolved my government. So I did all this to avoid another civil war, and we're in another civil war because you just dissolved the government. Okay, I give up. I can't keep doing this. So, 25 years ago, I wasn't in the suit and I was in this situation. Now, 25 years later, I'm in this situation. What was the point? I think Vader is really looking at it, and that's what weakens his abilities. Because, bear in mind, he's as strong as he is angry. But if he's not angry and if he's more tired, then his power is weakened. So,
and conflicted or in a state of doubt by episode 6, which Luke is responsible for. But I will say that episode 5 Vader, to me, I don't know if that's the height of his powers, but it definitely seems like that.
I think of him as at one of his weakest points.
Interesting. Movie. Just like let me bring you through my viewing. It's just maybe it's because of how incompetent everyone else is, right? But when they're discovering the Hoth, when they're realizing when they've discovered the Hoth base, Vader knows right away, and they're like, well, there's so many uncharted settlements, sir, and they're like, God, why do we still have to? This guy is such a pain. Why doesn't he just listen to the technology that clearly that we can listen to? And he's like, no, that's it. That's where the rebels are. Let's go. And he has to constantly deal with ineptitude around him.
Okay.
So I don't know, but maybe that's just let's hear your side of that.
I'll say this. Now, in terms of raw power, I don't think he's at his height.
Yeah.
But as a
That's
military
I wouldn't. Yeah,
as a
exactly.
military general, he's still at the top of his game to a large extent. Well, to an extent, he's exhausted emotionally and spiritually. But like
Right.
you look at his assault on Hoth. That's the best part of episode 5, in my opinion. Sorry,
Yes.
I really like that part.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
he's like, all right, we're gonna go in careful because I don't want to just charge in there and end up losing a portion of my fleet. We're going in slow. We're going in steady, and we're gonna slowly, like with a Black Widow spider, we're gonna weave a web, and we're gonna catch them with our claws, and we're gonna then devour them. That's what we're gonna do. I got this perfect plan. I got it all figured out, and he did. But then he had some idiots, like you pointed out, just going, what does he know? Even in the midst of the battle, it's like, oh yeah, sure. Doubt the guy who's never lost a freaking military battle in his entire military career as Darth Vader. Never lost a battle. Never lost a war. But what is
And not even aware of their screw up when it's happening either. Oh, Lord Vader, we've just entered atmosphere, and like, no, dude, you're about to die.
Yeah, and I just love
You're about
how you have him. Like, how does he describe one guy? He is as incompetent as he
Clumsy?
is stupid.
Right. Right.
Oh
He
yeah, he's
hated-
as
yeah.
clumsy as he is stupid. And then later he's like, well, the one guy, I'll go apologize for my mistake to Vader himself. Apology accepted, Admiral Piet. No, it was not Piet. It was someone else. Apology accepted, General Veers. It was General Veers, I believe. And then he chokes out one admiral and says, "Congratulations on your promotion, Admiral Piet. Do not fail me." And it's like, or something to that effect. And it's like, oh my gosh, holy crap! This guy means business.
Yeah. Such
But-
a presence, such a well done.
Yeah,
and,
but
like,
I also think
doing
that's,
so much with a lot less than a lot of the
Yeah.
other movies.
Yeah, and I also think him saying apology accepted was a flash of Anakin in a dark
Yes,
way. Like,
yeah.
that sense of humor of, oh, apology accepted after he kills the man. Like, that is such
100%.
that is such an Anakin Skywalker joke from episode 3 in a way. Oh, because it's the same kind of joke as with Obi-Wan. What's happened? How can we fall for this? We're smarter than this. Apparently not. From Anakin. Like, it's the same kind of sense of humor. Like, I don't know. I like both. I like them as both. So.
I do too.
And I think
Yeah.
Christensen did a perfect job as Anakin. Weirdly enough.
Oh, he's great.
Oh yeah, he's a great actor. I just wish he also did fantasy because, well, like I know people will say Star Wars is fantasy, but I mean like with kings, dukes, and all that stuff.
Medieval fantasy.
Any other questions?
I think we can wrap it up there. I
Yeah.
just really want to say thanks so much for your time, and it was really fun speaking to you guys about Star Wars. I mean, you guys are teaching me things that I didn't know, and I always love that because it's like, what else to read? What else to look at? So I already have some good ideas.
Seriously though, if you play the Jedi Knight series, they're super hard. And just remember, if you yell at the game because it's so hard, that's a natural response, I was told.
That helps. That always
Yeah.
helps.
I had a friend once say, you'll walk in with a clear throat, you'll walk out your throat hoarse for a week. With the first two games, Dark Forces 2 and Jedi Outcast. I know there's Dark Forces 1 out there, but I never tried it. But Jedi Academy, though, is very easy and very fun, and you go into that one, you'll just be laughing and cheering all the way through. It's like episode 4. You're just cheering your way through.
Wow. Well, I'm gonna have to check that out. And also, what else should our audience? Where should people find you guys again? Just to remind the audience.
We can be found mostly on Substack. We're kind of on YouTube, but we're not there as often anymore. So you can find us on Substack, where I think we write about anything and everything that comes to our mind, from chivalry and psychology to storytelling psychology to archetypes to Disney to Brothers Krynn to Gallivant
A
to
lot of analysis.
yeah, and
Yeah.
of course.
I really like your guys' analysis. I spent a good amount of time looking through those.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. We also do a lot of fantasy fiction, trying to apply our pen to our passion, which
Yeah.
is medieval fantasy, I guess. And we've started treading into writing the Three Musketeers, except in fantasy, in French, in our native language. And we're currently, I think, having fun with things like Baron Cub, Varcola, our kind of Dracula novel. We're writing a lot of stuff on Substack, so hopefully people will like that stuff.
There you have it. Substack is the place to be. I'm going to be hanging out there too. I'm going to be probably engaging with your guys' content because, yeah, you guys are definitely one of the top Substacks that I've seen on there. Yeah, you guys, and I can only think of like a handful, 2 or 3 other Substacks that I really like. So just keep doing what you're doing. I really enjoy it. I'm sure that more people are going to keep finding you guys. So.
Yes, Lord Higgins.
And with that, Lord Higgins, maybe I like the ring of that. It's not like maybe that'll work for me. But with that, thanks again, Brothers Krynn, Joe and Dan. It was great meeting you, great talking with you, and everyone, please go and check out their Substack. And with that, may the Force be with you all, and we'll see you guys all next time.
Yeah. May the Schwartz be with you all.